sometimes I've found that a mistake becomes a very important part of the therapy.
How you deal with mistakes is such a powerful part of how you develop relationships. Everything I say comes with a true-false question. Even if we're going to have an argument later about, well, is it or is it not? You tell me that, because that's going to help us know each other better. And I'm aware of how many mistakes I have made in my life with all relationships, but certainly even in therapy with assumptions.
It starts right here. In your heart, start right here. Oh, that's where it starts. Right here. We look to your heart. It's always and only starting right here.
Thom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger bring over 90 years of clinical experience to this important podcast, and they offer you a guarantee. You will gain something of personal value from each episode. And now, what matters most.
It starts right here. Start right here.
Hi, I'm Thom Rutledge, and welcome back to Start Right Here. And with me is my good buddy, Dr. Alan Berger. Hey, Alan.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Tom. We are starting right here today, aren't we?
Every time. It seems, I think it's like a theme.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. Hey,
but not.
We just caught on to it. How many shows?
Listen. I told you, I've told you before that, we've both talked about this, how we've written stuff in the past, and then later you read it and especially I look back at my first book, I go, I don't think I knew that stuff then, because I wrote it in 1989. I'm going that's really good. And I don't think I knew that. I certainly wasn't acting as if I knew that. And but so who knows how that actually works. The other piece is I would like to tell people is I heard this in AA years ago. Humans are forgetting machines. And so that this is one of those lowered expectations thing. It helps so much to realize that the point of recovery is not to get a better memory, but just to be surrounded by Post-it notes. And that's what we are to each other as support people. We're Post-it notes. Yeah. That's just, I can tell a client something one day and I can need you to say the exact same thing to me within 24 hours. And when you say it to me, it's going to be like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah.
So true.
So it's all about support.
So true. Yep. So true.
We're going to talk about confessions today.
Yes.
I know we were talking about confession. This is the first show I've had a little bit of nervousness about because, you latched on immediately. I can't remember exactly how it came up, but when we talked about, hey, why don't we just do a show about confessions of therapists, We've both been doing this for 600 years or however long that's been. We've been doing it.
Back in the days of dinosaurs. We used to have a Triceratops and a T-Rex in the office.
It's like a service animal. It's like,
oh God,
oh man, I can just there is a new Jurassic Park cartoon called Camp Jurassic Park. Okay.
If you're a Jurassic Park fan, it's on Netflix. It is so much fun. There's this kid who's playing a Jurassic Park game, and if you beat the game, you get an invitation to Camp Jurassic Park. And it's a lot. They've done a phenomenal job on it. But I was just thinking the other day, because the kids that were coming to the camp for this particular, invitation, pod or whatever they're called, they're in the lab where they're doing all the genetic dinosaurs, right? And they're hatching dinosaurs and stuff. And this one egg hatches and they're standing there and it's a baby ankylosaurus. And that was one of my favorite dinosaurs when I was a kid, the ankylosaurus. There was something about, I thought he was just fucking cool.
That's my favorite too, actually.
Was that your favorite too?
Yeah, the club for a tail and the spike.
Yeah, got this club and he's got this arm around his back and, the T-Rex tries to bite him and he smacks him in the head. With his tail. He was a cool dinosaur. But anyway, that's.
And you two have the same favorite dinosaur?
You have the same.
I thought you were making up a dinosaur name when you said what it was.
Ankylosaurus. I loved it. Oh, so Cece was playing, because I brought the dinosaurs out yesterday and we were talking about dinosaurs when we watched the show, and we had them all out, and it's amazing. So she's like 2.5 right now. Mm-hmm. So she's got these 2 brontosauruses. One's a little bigger than the other. And she goes, Mommy-saurus and Daddy-saurus. She took the names and made a hybrid.
Oh my goodness!
And that's pretty clever.
That's a smart. No kidding.
That's a smart 2.5-year-old, man. Mommy-saurus and Daddy-saurus.
Wow!
I was blown away. I know. I looked over, and Jess looked at me, and I looked at. She said, and then she did it again. I'm going, my God, that's amazing! How she just put that together. She created that. That's
a lot of syllables too.
That's a lot of syllables. That's a lot of. I could barely get it out of my mouth when I said it.
It was a mommy-saurus and a daddy-saurus. It's like, interesting. All right.
So look, this is Therapist Confessions, or we could say Confessions of 2 Therapeutic, heretics. I mean, listen, why I say that is because one of my favorite books all time, there's a couple. One was Confessions of a Medical Heretic by Dr. Mendelsohn, who was a pediatrician and who was head of the pediatric services at the University of Chicago's hospital, or Chicago Hospital. And he pulled the covers on the whole medical profession. He started with this position is that, and hopefully it's going to a therapist isn't as bad as this, but he said, your job when you go see a medical doctor is to get in and out with what you need with your life intact. I mean, he says, especially if you go to a hospital. He says, a hospital is one of the most dangerous places in the world with all the infections that exist in a hospital. So you want to get in and out. You want to make sure they know who you are. They make mistakes all the time at confusing patients. I mean, it was a brilliant book in terms of what this one American president of the American Psychological Association called turning psychology over to the grassroots, or turning medicine over to the grassroots, is empowering people so that when they go to get medical services, they can take some responsibility and take care of themselves. And
that's
what I hope we're going to be able to do today, is to talk about some of the blunders that we've made. I know you've only made 2 or 3, but I've made about 45. But no, I'm teasing. Yes, we've all made.
More than 45. I'm sure.
It's a lot more than 45.
Quit.
My ego is only going to let me admit 45 right now. I mean,
but you know what? There's a positive application to this that you just brought up, which is something. Because I say this to people about going to doctors and to therapists, and that is, be a good consumer of the service.
Yes.
And it's like, and I'll say sometimes people in our business will forget that we are in a service oriented business. That basically, when I say, it's like one of the things I'll say to people sometimes, and they some of them look pretty surprised. I say, look, my job is not to forget that I work for you. You pay me and I work for you. And it's like, and your doctor does too. And I'll say sometimes doctors tend to forget that faster than social workers in my profession. It's like, but it's important to do that. And I love that grassroots thing because the more we, and on the people helping, we'll generalize it to the people helping business, welcome that collaboration or that consumerism, the better job we do.
That's right.
So that's something we do right. That's something we do right. That's good to point that out before we start telling everybody to think of the things we've done wrong.
Yeah,
it's that we did something right. Yeah,
we got one. We're gonna hold on to one.
Now, Patrick, you're going to be our meter here, though. It's like if we just start sharing shit that shouldn't be shared. I think you're at the controls. You're the producer. Just shut us down.
It's like
Patrick's going, this is not good for anybody. Oh, thank you.
All right. So when we're talking about this, one confession I have to make
Right.
is that I definitely am aware that I have some implicit biases. And let me tell you what happened in this session. So I was working with this couple in recovery, both in recovery. And she probably had about a year and a half. He had a couple years. And she was so frustrated with him. He was so withholding in the relationship, and people would label him as passive aggressive, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot they were talking about one thing, and she's just literally pouring her heart out to him. And she turns to him and says, is there anything you could say to me? And he goes, and he just looks at her. And she just couldn't take it anymore. And she reaches across and smacks him on the arm.
Mm-hmm.
I think she hit him in the shoulder left. She was sitting on the right side. She hits him in the shoulder. And, and then eventually he started to own some of what was going on with him, and that he was resentful and didn't want it, and started getting honest about some stuff. So, comes back for the next session, and he turns to me and he says, I got a beef with you.
Mm-hmm.
I go, what is that? He goes, what would you have done if I turned and I hit my wife in the shoulder when we were in the session? And I went, uh-oh.
Yep.
I go, wow. Yeah, I wouldn't have sat here.
Mm-hmm.
I would have definitely objected to it and said, hey, it's not okay. We keep our hands to ourselves or something. I would have jumped in and said something. He says, so what was going on? I go, God, I got a bias here. I thought, she's a gal, you're a guy. She's hitting you in the shoulder. You can take that punch. He goes, that's not cool, man. I go, you know what? You're right. It's not cool. I go, that was a mistake. I'll own that. And I'm sorry that I didn't say anything about it. I said, and I'm glad you're coming and saying something to me now. But what stopped you at the time from turning to me and saying, what the hell do I do with this? What stopped you from dealing with it at the moment? Because I'll own that I had. And I wasn't doing that to deflect. I really was doing that because it was part of the therapy. I'm going to look at my thing, and I wanted him to look at what stopped him as well.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point too, Alan, because I think a lot of times the stuff that's going to come up that would probably come up if we had a group of therapists doing the blooper stuff is that what we would be doing is hopefully talking about creative things in which we inadvertently find ourselves a part of the therapy, which does happen, and it's like and it's like I think and I believe this is my bias. My belief is that if that's happening organically in the session, because it may be even because of a mistake that we make, then we need to stay there. We don't need to run. That we don't need to back up and start scratching our beard and saying and tell me how you feel about that kind of stuff. I love the idea that so proceed. But
that was the one thing that came to mind because it was such a striking example.
Yeah.
And and then he said to me, well, he's and it was interesting because he was exploring the counter transfers. He said, did you want to hit me? I said, the truth is I am frustrated with how you behave in here, but I talked to you about it at the time and I took care of myself back then. So for me, it wasn't that. It was just that I just have this idea that she's a gal. And so if she's going to hit you, it's not going to be as big a deal as if you reached across and hit her. And I could see I was wrong about that. But you know what that did? And I got to say this, and it really allowed me to repair the disruption or the rupture to the relationship with him by not getting defensive with it and by really just holding him and holding the space for him and really taking a look at it and being honest with him about it. He really appreciated that because he didn't expect it. He thought I was going to do some psychobabble stuff and dismiss it or turn it around on him or anything like that. And he said to me at when we did wrap things up, he says, that was a real turning point because I wasn't sure I could trust you up to that point. But when you own that, I had a lot more trust for you. So this is the other interesting thing is that sometimes I found that a mistake becomes a very important part of the therapy.
Yes, I agree, and I think that, and I think that's we can also generalize that to how you deal with mistakes is such a powerful part of how you develop relationship. And it's like in this particular in the people helping business, a lot of times it's almost like if we want to, we kind of can take a pass. And we can sidestep it and defend ourselves by stepping back into the what I call the beard scratcher role. But it's like, no, I agree with you because I would when you said that, I thought, no, absolutely. I mean, just the idea of I tell people that every question, I said, everything I say, I said, I tend to speak like I know what I'm talking about is one of my things I tell people. I said, and I said, and sometimes I do. But I said, sometimes I can get really fired up about this. This is where some of my errors come because I can I get as fascinated with my clients about therapy as I do with you when we're talking about it. And I can go like, I can just take off, and I realize, turn around and look, can't find my client anywhere, and I'm someplace, way down the line. But one of the things I tell people is that everything I say, no matter how certain I seem, it comes with a true false question. If I'm saying something that it just simply doesn't fit, that you think is wrong, and it's even if we're going to have an argument later about, is it or is it not, you tell me that because that's going to help us know each other better. And I don't want to make, because I'm aware of how many mistakes I have made in my life with all relationships, but certainly even in therapy with assumptions. They get us in trouble.
That's right.
Yeah. I have one that is similar to that. It doesn't have such a wonderful outcome to the therapy, but it changed the course of my career somewhat, fairly significantly. I think I was working with adolescents, with an alcohol and drug program with adolescents, and then I'd gone into private practice, so I was seeing some of those clients and families in private practice. And so I was in my private practice working with, this was a young woman, probably 16, maybe, and what I found is I generally didn't have any problem working with the adolescents, but I talk about a bias. I tended not to do so well with the parents. And I think we can say that, I can make some arguments that I think it's just some of the stuff that was basically hitting my stuff about, because I was, I lived my life as rebelling against everything. So I would get parents who were being controlling, and I think it hit on those aspects of me. I won't go into all those details, but the bottom line was, the short version of this is this one young woman was telling me things that about what was going on with her, and my job at that point, because of the family therapy component, was to be sharing all of that with their parents. But I wasn't doing that because I didn't trust the parents. So the confrontation, Nashville. I was over on 18th Avenue South. Had a great, wonderful office over on 18th Avenue South near Music Row. Chet Atkins used to sit on the curb, literally out on the curb in front of my place, because his secretary owned the building. And he would sit there waiting for a friend of his sometimes. And so I came with my office came with Chet Atkins. It's like, but this conversation happened right on my front porch there. That's a cat's tail, by the way, if it goes in front of it. And he found out this stuff I didn't tell him. And it's like, there was no harm was done, but it's like, he was just really mad at me. And I didn't like this guy, and he was talking to me and he was telling me stuff. But the thing is, I was just standing there and I realized he was right. He was absolutely right. It didn't matter what I felt about him personally. It didn't matter what, it's like, I was in the wrong. That was not my job to make that call. And so that one, I felt sad. I felt humiliated. I have no idea who might been driving by on 18th Avenue at the time when I was being blessed out by this guy. But I decided after that, I'm done with adolescence. It's like, I need to work with people who are just responsible for themselves, that I can do that because not because, I can't handle that guy. It's because I'm not good at this part.
Yeah.
It was a moment after a while. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't perfect, but it was humility for me. It was like, this is not an area that I'm not going to be excelling at. I still work with some adolescents, but I work with them in conjunction with other therapists, other parents. I'd be sure I'm real clear about all the boundaries and things like that. But it's like, it was certainly an embarrassing moment, and one in which I was wrong.
Yeah, it is challenging, because it's like, it's that difficult scene. And I know what you're talking about because I've worked with some adolescents too. And, the parents, legally, it's even an issue that's debated a lot in terms of who holds the privilege, right? I mean,
right.
Do the parents hold the privilege? Do the kids hold the privilege? And, most people would say the parents actually hold the privilege, but then there comes this thing called, confidentiality. Is how do you respect the kid's confidentiality? It's those things are tough things to navigate.
Yeah.
And people find that too, when they're treating different couples, and one of the couples calls you up and says, hey, I didn't want to bring this up with my wife, but I've been screwing an elephant. I've been having sex with animals or something like that.
Right.
It's like, not that I've ever had that happen. I mean, nobody's ever called me, but I'm just making a point that these are challenges for every therapist in terms of what to do. Even if I get somebody, that comes to me and is suicidal, right? In terms of how many times do you put somebody on a 5150? Do you call the police right away, or do you try to work it out? These are all judgment calls, aren't they?
Oh, let's not line this one up for the very next podcast, but there's a session all unto itself too. If we're looking deeper into the work with as what it's like to be a therapist is the suicidal stuff. It's like those are powerful stories, and they're very important, and it is. When you're trying to have trust with people, the short version of it is if so many clients are aware that if they bring up the fact that they're thinking about killing themselves, that we will immediately shift into liability thinking, that we will hospitalize them no matter whatever else they say. And there's legitimate reason for that. There are people who are going to do that. And it's like, and what I always tell them is like, we got to find a way so that this is if that's what's going on with you, life and death, to be or not to be, that's the most important thing happening. If you can't trust me with that, then we got a problem. We got to work this out. And so anyway, that's a different story, but let's do that sometime.
Here's my second confession.
Okay.
This one is tough because I felt a lot of pain about this one. This woman came to me. She was in her probably late 20s, if I remember correctly. She was sober, but it was a very unstable recovery. Meaning she'd get a couple months and she'd relapse, get a few more months and relapse. And on one of her recent relapses, she got pregnant. I think she was at a bar, picked up a guy, brought him home, and ended up sleeping with him with no protection. And she was really struggling. She couldn't hold a job on. She was, very low fee client at that point in time. I had a very aggressive sliding scale. I think I was seeing her for like $10 or $20 an hour because, I was starting out and I wanted to just get as much experience as I could. So she was seeing me and she was really good. I mean, that $10 was like $100 for anybody else for her. So it was really, but I wanted her to pay something, you know what I mean? I felt like it's important that she get invested in some way. So she comes in and she goes, God, what do I do? Do I keep this child? Do I not keep this child? And so now we start to have a lot of dialogues about it. Today, I would have handled it so much different than I handled it before. But it was one of these things where I was young. I mean, young, both emotionally and professionally. And she was saying, well, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And at that point in time, I was falling in the trap of answering those things sometimes.
Right.
And, and I would say, I think it's a tough one. I says, how would you feel about abortion? She goes, well, I'm not against abortion. I go, well, then you got to weigh this out. You're struggling right now. And what would it mean to bring a kid into this thing? And, she'd go on and I'd say, I just don't see that it's a good thing for you. So she ended up aborting at one point, and maybe 10 years later, she gives me a call. She goes, I need to come in and talk to you. I have a resentment towards you. I go, please come on in. So she sits down. She goes, you really fucking weighed in on that thing and you shouldn't have. You said how you felt about it. And I've always wondered if you made that decision for me or did I make that? And I really resent you for that. I mean, that was my decision. It wasn't your decision. And I have to be clear on that. And I haven't been because of that happened. And I've always wondered, what if you didn't say that? Would I have decided and stuff? And it's just made this very, very difficult for me to find any peace with it. Wow. And I said, wow, first of all, thanks for coming back in and having the courage to confront me. And that was really fucked up on my part. You're right. I had no business weighing in at all, even if you're asking me. That's your decision, and today I wouldn't weigh in on that. I would have you struggle with the two parts of you.
You would facilitate the conversation between the two of her. Yeah. So
much differently than I did. But once again, I was very new, but I'm not excusing myself. It's still a mistake. I still was a licensed therapist. That still was a mistake. And I felt terrible about it. I'll tell you, the one thing that it did do is I have never made another decision for a client since that point. I mean, it really put home this thing about this is their life and it's up to them. And I really brought home what, I think it was Carl Whitaker that said, the client is responsible for your life. The therapist is responsible for the therapy. And don't ever confuse the two. You are not responsible for the life that they've got to live. They have to make those choices and live it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting. First thing I have is especially from the way you describe her coming back in is she was, it sounds, I mean, this is me making an assumption, but it sounds to me like she's working a pretty good program at that point. It's like I'm going like that. If she's just coming in, to I mean, and I'm not saying it wouldn't be legitimate, but just deflecting blame and just trying not to shame herself and that kind of stuff. But it sounds so like she was. I mean, she'd spend a lot of time with it, obviously, and it's like first thing I really thought. Wow, good for her. That's what my wow is. My wow was the same as your wow was. Thank you for being here. How cool are you to be here? Because it's but the other thing about that is we both told us we've told a story about something we messed up and we screwed up on, and that made that we learned from, that we made choices. The old redecision therapy only in adult life. The decision to make it. It's like, so mine was to say, okay, I don't think I need to be dealing with these families of adolescents. Yours is, it's like a broader one, a bigger one, and one we can all benefit from. We can benefit from your story even. It's like, so that if that shows up in, if somebody's asking me next week to make a decision, just in case I haven't learned that lesson, I love the idea that I can learn that lesson from your life so that I don't have to learn it from mine. But I love what I like, and I'm not like you said, I'm not trying to let you off the hook, me off any hook. But the truth is, we do make mistakes. People make mistakes, and if we're learning something as we're learning, as growing into our business, into our profession, we're going to make more mistakes. It's like the the thing about it in terms of self-esteem is, am I learning from these things? Am I, I mean, I remember, I mean, this is a general kind of thing of confession, but I remember being, when you first learn how to do this stuff, you imitate people. Okay. So
Right.
Eventually, I always tell people in my training workshops is like, eventually if somebody asks you what your model of therapy is, you need to be able to say mine, not eclectic or that this go like, it's pretty much mine. It's like, but not at first, because, if you think, at the beginning, so there I was, coming out of graduate school, working with clients. And one week I would be Albert Ellis, just cussing people and yelling at them and telling them what they should do. And the next I'd be Carl Rogers and, listening carefully. And these are the same clients. I mean, depending on what I'm reading, it's like, I mean, I actually paused in some of my workshops just to thank early clients of mine. The way I say it is I don't know if they were just really kind people, who were even older than I was, certainly, and they would let me be their therapist, or they were just stupid, but they let me learn on them. And it's like, I remember I did Frank Farley's Provocative Therapy. I loved provocative therapy.
Not many people read that book, Frank Farley.
I mean, and the truth is, my belief about that is Frank Farley can pull off provocative therapy like I can pull off laughing at everybody. It's like, I have that sign that my friend put in my office that says, just because I think everything's hilarious doesn't mean I'm not taking you seriously. And I asked him, I said, why do you feel, he said, you just laugh at your clients all the time. And I go, well, but it works. It's okay, because they know that I'm not laughing. I'm really not laughing at them. I'm seeing the humor in things, and I am taking it seriously. But I mean, provocative therapy was basically you listen for what the person, especially when we're dealing with self-criticism, and you just latch onto it and you become that should monster yourself, the critic. And I know there were a couple of clients that left therapy during that time that I have thought, oh my God!
Doing a Frank Farley impersonation.
Yeah, if I could find those people, I owe them an amends to that. But also just the inconsistency. I was reading a book at one point called The Unquiet Dead by Edith Fiore. She's one of those crazy people out there in California. Never mind. It's
you have a lot of fun.
It's actually a wonderful book, and I loved reading about her work. And she's just a very smart woman. And it's like I don't know if she's still out there working or not, but it's like, but I mean, I would still recommend the book. But she was working in. This was back in the 1980s, so we were into the world. I was into the world of metaphysics and reincarnation, and hers was about spirit possession, not demon possession, just spirits trapped on the earth who attach themselves to human beings, usually having to do with addiction of some kind, like having a hunger, like that kind of stuff. So she would actually treat. It was really fascinating because she would actually treat the possessing spirit if she could get in touch with it through hypnosis. So, but the point being here, as far as my practice is, one week I did learn this lesson, and I don't think I spoke at the wrong times, but I noticed everybody I was seeing that week, I was thinking, I think they're spirit possessed, and that became sort of the end of the phase of my therapy where I didn't let things sort of just incubate for a while before they started coming out of me. I would just stop imitating people directly because I thought, I'm pretty sure that's not right. I'm pretty sure that everybody I'm seeing this week is not possessed by spirits trapped on the earth. And it's like, so I was just, sometimes it takes extreme examples to get my attention, but anyway, the other thing is, I mean, the other people did put up with a lot of my inconsistencies going back and forth as I was learning stuff. Yeah, definitely. Now I'll tell one that I tell in my workshops. I'm going to get my cat out of the way. My cat wants to be between me and whatever I'm doing. But this is when I tell at workshops, and I've had more than one therapist come up to me during the workshop in the break and say, I don't think I would share that one. It's just a client I'd seen for a long time. I still see her every now and then. And it's like, and I'm talking about something that I think is obviously relevant. And she says, Tom, could we talk about me for a minute? And I always tell her, I tell her exactly as I did. I said, my response was, okay, if we have to. It's like, let's do it. And she did. But I had the relationship with that woman where it was like, it's one of those places, because I've certainly had therapists who've done that to me. And I know that I do that. Sometimes I try not to, where I can, where I'm identifying, thinking, little self-disclosure is important here. And then I'm off on some trail telling some story that,
right.
that they don't give a shit about. It's and she loves, I have told her that's one of my best stories in my workshop. And she and I are good, on good terms. And she loves that I tell that.
That's a great story. I've had a variation on that happen in a couple of sessions every now and then.
Talk about you.
Hey, can I finish saying what I want to say or something like that? I go, oh, yeah, that's right. It is about you, isn't it?
We're very fortunate. I mean, we really are. Because people have been very patient with me as a therapist.
Well, here's another mistake I made that I think that I've not made a lot of times, but I can see it was a mistake I made with this fellow. So he and his wife came to see me. They were in serious trouble. He was being faced with domestic violence charges. She was like 95 pounds and he was like 225. And he was holding her up by the neck on the refrigerator with her 2 feet off the ground and stuff like this. And it was a pretty serious offense. It was going to have an impact on his certification and licensing. And so it was a big deal. And so his attorney said, it's best you be proactive about this and go to get some help. So he comes to the first session and starts to lay out what's going on. And of course, his assessment is that she's the problem, because after all, she got him to this point where he wants to put her up against the refrigerator and choke her out. And he goes on and says, look, I just got to tell you from the beginning that I've been in therapy for a long time. I know myself very, very well. She's really hasn't been in therapy. She doesn't really know what's going on with herself. And he's laying out this whole case about how great he is and how she really should be my patient and that it's just a fluke that he's there. And I'm pretty good at challenging that. I mean, I don't shy away from that stuff. I mean, I take that on pretty direct. And I did challenge him with it. But this is the mistake I made. I called him out on it. I says, look, but I think I was too easy about it. I think this is how I remember it going, something like, I go, look, what you're telling me is that she's the problem. And I don't buy into that, by the way. I'm going to, first of all, I want the space to be able to come up with my own conclusion about what you guys need, because that's why you came to see me, right? That I'm not hiring you as my consultant. I think I said to him, I don't need a consultant here. And if I did, it wouldn't be you. It would be somebody else, because you're going to see this problem through your eyes, which is part of the problem here. So I was good at that. I mean, I was clear on that message and stuff like that. And I even checked in and she goes, this is it all the time. He's always taking this one-up position on me. So we kind of worked. But what I didn't do that I regretted doing, and it really paid or showed up later on, I didn't turn to him and say, so I need to know where you're at with what I'm saying to you. Is there room for you to for you to weave your consciousness with what I'm saying, or you believe strongly in your position and what I just said to you doesn't matter? See, I wish I would have found that out. I assumed that I was so right on that it was self-evident what I was saying, right? That it was so powerful. And I didn't turn to him. And what happened then is over the next, I think I saw them together 7 times. She was seeing another therapist that referred them to me. Out of those 7 times, I think he showed up to 4 of the sessions. And what it was is he really didn't buy into that. He needed to look at himself. Wasn't going on at all. So she, after I think another session he didn't show up, she talks to her therapist. She decides to divorce him. And then I get this, I get this call from him, an email from him, and he is reading me the riot act. See, this is what I told you. Look at you didn't help her. Now she's leaving. Isn't this great? Now she's leaving me. I'm going to be reporting you to the board. You're just a terrible goddamn therapist. And this is what I was talking about, is how the hell couldn't you confront her on these? I mean, screaming messages to the point where I was starting to feel like I've got to watch my back when I walk out of this office at night, because I leave at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And I was starting to get afraid for my safety, my personal safety.
Yep.
This guy was so angry and so convinced about how wrong I was. And oh my God, he would go on and on. And I swear, and it even happened. So then I get these things from him, and I just say to him, look, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to go get a restraining order because you're threatening me. And if I get another one of these, didn't hear from him for a year, then he's in the middle of his divorce and it's going sour again. And he sends me another thing. See. And it was one point in time, it was like so absurd. I said to him, you have these expectations about what I was supposed to do, and you weren't even showing up to the therapy to participate. And yet you're putting this on me. I had 7 sessions with you and you showed up for like 3.5 of them. It was so interesting, but I can see my mistake was that in that first session, I needed to lay my ground rules down with him. That if I'm going to work with you, you need to decide that you can leave your head with my consciousness here or not. Because if you think you're right, I don't need to get involved in trying to convince you. That's not my job.
Right.
Is to convince you. I'll help you look at some stuff and become aware of blind spots you have. But I don't feel like I need to be in the role of taking responsibility for something you're not responsible for.
Well, yes. And I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm doing hindsight supervision, it's sort of like, that'd been good. It's like, from what you're describing, I doubt seriously you would have gotten much different results with this guy at all. I think it's just going to bounce right off of him. It's like, but what I also want to point out is when you said what you wished you had said, is what I realized how often I have heard you say something very similar to clients the way, and it goes to the thing we were just talking about. Stuff we didn't know stuff before we knew stuff. Right. It's like part of there are things that I say and do with people, especially about what you and I've talked about that before. My teacher Jackie Demgard calls it "don't never proceed without a contract." It's like where you're stopping long enough to say, what do you think about this? How do you like that? It's like, I'm sure there were times where you didn't have that as a part of your repertoire, and it's like it's always as a part of your repertoire now. It's like it's almost like it would just be blatantly missing if I was sitting there watching you work with a client and you gave an opinion. There was a definite opinion about something and didn't actually then follow that up with finding out where that landed with them. Yeah. I get that. It also reminds me of something that our mutual friend Carol in our support group talked about one time, and that is looking back over her shoulder and always having compassion for the younger version of herself. Yeah. And it's like the idea that part of hopefully what we've learned in our recovery is not to deny, not to minimize the power of some of our errors or our mistakes, but to realize that at any given time we were always doing the best we could do. Same thing we teach other people. And it's like, right. It's
what the other thing that I got out of that for me was this thing, it's okay to not help everybody that comes in my office.
Yeah.
Is to be able to say, no, I don't think this is going to work out. And,
Right.
and it's so interesting that wasn't an option a lot of times for me when I was younger.
Right.
Today, it's
Right.
much more of an option.
Yeah.
In fact, I start out every time I work with somebody, I say, let's talk about whether we're a fit or not.
Yeah.
So we can have the option of saying no to this thing, right?
Right.
As we get going, which, you know what I just connected? That's why I do that now.
Yeah.
I didn't realize
another decision
I adopted that because of
That's right. Every policy I have, whether it be written down on the paperwork you get when you come to see me, or whether it has come from a mistake.
Yeah,
something I overlooked somewhere I didn't know, and I did that. Now I will piggyback real quickly because I have not that I'm calling that client a narcissist, but I was working with this blatant narcissist and his wife, and he wanted to come in to see me sometimes individually. I mean. God, they designed narcissism based on him. It's like, so I thought, you know what? Sometimes when we're dealing with borderline personality disorder people nowadays, we tell them that. We tell them their diagnosis, and we do. And they deal with that. It's like the CBT stuff and all this other stuff. It's like what is? I got the wrong letters there.
No, you're right. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy.
That's it. That's the one I was thinking about. The dialectical. Yeah. It's So I call up my friend David McMillan. I don't know if you know David. Do you know David from Nashville? A psychologist I'd worked with for a long time. He and I bill ourselves when we're working together as the exact opposite of each other. And this guy, he loves to work with angry people. He loves them, and he loves to make people angry, and he's a very creative therapist, but he does a lot of work with narcissists, but he does it in the form of working with them with his anger management program. He doesn't call them narcissists, but I called it. So I said, David, I'm going to treat this guy. I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to treat this guy by telling him he's a narcissist, teaching him about narcissism, and I'm going to help him recover from his narcissism. And David McMillan, the guy who would he wouldn't run from a fight if his life depended on it. He goes, don't do it, Tom. don't do it. So a short version here is I gave this guy, I explained narcissism to him. I gave him a book that I was using at the time. It's called The Wizard of Oz and Other Narcissists, which I think is a great book. It's like, I said, I want you to read this, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk. He came back the next session, and I mean, without the bit of there's no humor, there was no irony, nothing to it. That man did a masterful job of taking everything in that book and making the case for how everybody in his life, including me, was a narcissist, but he wasn't. It was like it was an absolute education for me. And I was old enough and been doing it long enough where I just finished with going, okay. And I called David up and told him, you were right about that. That didn't work out so well. It's like, but it was such an interesting experience to watch the guy work. And as often is the case with narcissists, our relationship was fine because a true narcissistic personality disorder they just reset. So, nothing's happened. So it's like, it was a bizarre experience, but definitely a mistake for therapy that I will not do that one again. Yeah.
That's fun. And look, I just want to say this, if people are listening, I take full responsibility, and I know Tom does too, for what goes
Absolutely.
right and what goes wrong in the therapy. And my mentor, Dr. Kempler, was very clear that if the therapy doesn't go well, it's more important for me to look at what I could have done differently rather than blame the patient.
Absolutely.
He says, Alan, that's the only way you're going to learn. Mm-hmm. It's not about that somebody wasn't ready to get well. It's just that you didn't have the tools or the skills at that point that you were able to reach them. Mm-hmm. And he says, so you remember that if somebody's leaving the therapy, then, well, that's a lot easier to do than when that guy's blaming me for all the shit that I didn't do. Yeah. And it's interesting because I had one session with him that I really thought was a breakthrough. When he was in the middle of this stuff, he came back to me because he knew I was a straight shooter with him. And he sat, and it was so moving. He opened himself up and was so vulnerable. And I thought, man, we turned the corner. And 3 weeks later, it was right back to the same shit. It's like he could not sustain that intimacy. And I couldn't anticipate that he was going to struggle with it so much afterwards. Today, one of the things I learned from you is to interpret how somebody's going to experience that later on. Is to say something, after this heavy session, it might get scary for you and you might now get angry at me again. And if that starts to happen, I want you to register that this is going on right now.
Yeah.
I've learned that from you in terms of some of the stuff that
you also just described that whole, I call the narcissistic reset too. The idea that that is, and that's a defense. I mean, it's like, I had family members who have that defense. It's like, and I've actually told clients before, I said, who are afraid who get to a place where they really need to say some honest things to a parent who's narcissistic, and they need to say it to have said it, not so that it's going to change the. So you just need. Sometimes it's just a one-way communication. I need to have said this to you, and I remember one woman who was really scared to do that, but she did that with her mom, and she described all the stuff that she had said, and she said, "I'm really afraid of the next time I talk to her." And I knew that I never met the mom, but I knew the story pretty well, and I said, "I think you'll be fine. I think you'll be surprised that she will respond to you as if nothing's ever happened," and she did. And it was like, but what I said to her was, "But it's really important to always remember that you said that stuff." That you did say what you needed to say, even though she couldn't hear it, and that was her defense. She couldn't hear it because because what people don't get a lot about narcissism is they're so fragile. Yeah.
So this is what I want to say to some people, because we said, how can you be a better consumer? So what I would warn you is, if your therapist has made a mistake and they don't own it, and they somehow turn it around on you and don't take any responsibility, run as fast as you can to another therapist, because what they're doing. It's just, I believe that if the stuff that I'm working with people is really has value, then it's going to apply to my life, not just my client's life. And in fact, this is one of the things that Dr. Kempler used to say all the time. You can tell a Gestalt therapist not so much by what they do, but who they are, how they live their life.
Wow.
And are they following the same principles that they're teaching other people? Are they being authentic? Are they, trying to learn from their mistakes? Are they applying the same principles that they're encouraging their clients to live by in their own life? And that's my measure. If you find that kind of a therapist, they're going to be able to do you a lot of good. They're going to be able to help you really take a look at your life and grow yourself. And that doesn't mean you're not going to outgrow your therapist, because sometimes you do. Sometimes you move on and it's time for some new input and stuff like that. And that's okay too. And that's the other thing. If your therapist is having a hard time letting go, and starts to insert doubt about you going out and trying things on your own or backing off sessions, it's also not a great sign, because I encourage my people, you see me as long as you need to see me. It's not that we have to meet weekly or we don't have to meet weekly. It's just that we're going to do what you need to do. Right. And the therapy is about what you need, not about what bills I have to pay. Right? It's based on what you need. And that's, you've got to get clear on that. And the other thing is, and I don't know what your policy is about this, but I don't care how many other people go and talk to if they're talking to me.
I don't know. Me neither.
I don't care. If you get a good idea from someone else, come and share it with me so I can learn.
Yeah. But no, I tell people about that, because, sometimes somebody they'll decide they want to see somebody about something in particular, and then that therapist will say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you'll have to terminate the therapy with this other person." And I'm going I tell them, I say, "Look, I'm like homeroom. It's like I'm just here. It's like if somebody else, if you're interested in somebody else, it's like you can go away and stay away, and you can come back anytime you want. It's like the idea, and I say, just beware of too many cooks spoil the broth theory. It's like, if you got somebody that's telling you opposite of me and you're coming to me, that could be confusing. But otherwise, it's like, again, it's just about them being a good consumer. It's like, you know what you get here, you know what and you get to choose it. Nobody gets to choose that for you.
Yeah, that's right. And the policy I have is I don't care how many cooks are in the kitchen. What you taste is going to tell you which person to what
right.
and to listen to. And if what I'm saying to you sweetens the pot, then use it. If what they're saying sweeten the pot, use it.
Right.
And like I said, my attitude always is that, if you get information from someone that's useful, then let's plug it in and tell me about it so I can learn too.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm serious about that I want people to do that. But I want people listening to this to see that's the important thing, is that you feel that this therapist is committed to your growth and your well-being, and that they're not trying to control you. I've seen people in therapy with people that are very controlling, and the person misinterprets that is that they really care about me. But then there's no wiggle room. This person, you're checking in everything. A great example of it is what happened with the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let's just tell everybody that story for a while. Brian Wilson had a lot of trouble with staying in touch with reality. Mm-hmm. The psychosis may have been induced by the hallucinogenics, and he used a lot of them at some point in time. And he hooked up with this therapist that he really got very close to, and got closer and closer to. In fact, the therapist moved into his house. He was now co-producer on albums. He was co-author on writing the songs. Right.
Right.
I mean, the guy lost his license in California because of the boundary violations. I mean, Brian Wilson wouldn't do anything in his life unless his therapist approved of it. And finally, Brian's wife had to take this therapist to court and sue him and have him removed from the house so that she could have a decent relationship with her husband again and to get him some other help. I mean, that happens. And it doesn't just happen with movie stars and recording artists and stuff like that. So I just want you to make you aware of that too, if you're out there.
Don't. So the summation there is, if your therapist is moving in with you, probably not a good idea. Okay.
There's a problem. Tom and I, listen, we're not controlling you. We're not deciding for you.
It's
not deciding anything for you, but we would like you to consider if your therapist is moving in with you.
Put the part of you that wants the therapist to live with you in that chair, and Oh my God!
That's the sign, though, isn't it? If it's that far, it might be a problem, right? I worked with the folks down in Georgia. What was the name of the program that they had? The Moonies, Bobby Mooney. Dr. Bobby Mooney, and had this great thing they used to do. You might be an alcoholic if, right? Like that one guy.
Based on like the Jeff Foxworthy stuff.
Like Jeff Fox, you might be a redneck if, right?
Yeah.
He goes, you might be an alcoholic if you're giving yourself an enema with vodka because you've got esophageal varices and you can't swallow the vodka anymore. I love that one. You might be an alcoholic if you've gotten 3 car accidents and you haven't even pulled out of your driveway yet.
The one I always learned when I was doing evaluations for alcoholism was the guy that trained me. He said, you got to do these hour-and-a-half evaluations, but sometimes you'll know right away. And he says, if somebody comes in for an evaluation and before they sit down, they have a DUI and they blame the police for it, he says, you got an alcoholic.
You might be an alcoholic if you've been arrested 4 times and every time it's the cop's fault, right?
That's right. Always the cop's fault. Those damn cops. Yeah.
So this has been an interesting session. I hope that we've shared some things that get you to be thoughtful about, your experience you're having in therapy. If not, hopefully that we haven't scared you away from trying therapy.
Right.
And that you can see that we're just human beings over here too. And
Works in progress. We're works in progress, and that's what you want. Is I always tell people I would never go to a therapist who's never been in therapy. I mean, it's like because not because they don't have to have the exact same thing I have. I just want to know they believe in the product. I want to know that they don't see themselves as
So true.
the way I say it is like, oh, I have so much, because that's the truth about who becomes therapist. I mean, I tell people in my professional training audiences, it's like, we don't become therapists because we have so damn much mental health. We can't wait to share it. We tend to be a crazy bunch. But we're seekers. We're looking for things, and it's like, and we find that we want to, as we find it, we want to share it, and we're all works in progress.
Okay, so how do they learn about your work, Tom?
If they still want to after this, they could do that by going to my website, thom&rsquo.com, and there's free downloads and things about my books and stuff. Our Alan's and my 12 episode video series is on there. Many other things. So just check that out. And if you have questions for me, you can email me from the website. Just shoot me an email.
And you can learn about my work at abphd.com. That's www.abphd.com. And like Tom, I've got a bunch of open sources for you to download and look at. Tom's got a bookstore on his website. I have a bookstore. I've got some stuff that's available on Amazon, as Tom does. And so if you enjoy what we're doing, please share it with others. Even if you don't, please share it with others. We just want to get the word out. And look,
we're having too much fun, man. We want to keep doing
that's
it.
The thing, and I hope you guys can hear that. Is that we take this stuff serious, but we're also laughing at ourselves and realize that no one among us has been able to maintain perfect adherence to these principles, right?
Nope.
The point is, we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. We claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection.
Absolutely. Amen.
All right. We'll see everybody next time.
Peace.
It's a spiral, not a circle. Goes round, round, round. Look for solutions. Be your own friend. Never say never in either direction. Look in the mirror. Trust the reflection. That's where it starts, right here. Won't you look to your heart? It's always in